We still do 7 NUFC Matters show a week for free. But if you want to help support NUFC Matters, then there are a few ways of doing it. Hit the like button on each live broadcast and video. This helps the channel grow. Hit the subscribe button and select the all notifications bell so you don't miss a single show. If you want to help us financially, then you can join the channel using this button with the membership starting at $1.99 a month. Or you can drop us a donation in the chat using a super sticker. We're also looking for sponsors. If you'd like your brand advertised on the flyers for the show and featured during the ad break, then email John at nufcmatters.com to arrange today.
Just a question of taste with you, well, if you've gone sour, you want the world plus everything, but you won't work an hour, and now your questions are kept creeping, and you go and buy her flowers, you throw away the dreams we had, boy, I won't allow it, instead we're gonna fall out, let's see you get out. I think we're gonna fall out, so shut your mouth.
Good evening and welcome to NUFC Matters, and when there's an emergency you send for the professionals. So here they are, Stu and Mitch, of course, ably supported by Batman and Robin, Steve Hasty and Keith Patterson. And because of all the hoo-ha and news that we've had over the last 48 hours with the news coming out of Man City's legal case, it felt only right to do this. And because I can't do a professional show this weekend at the same time as the lads, we decided to do the professionals today rather than Sunday and get this all out of the way. And a lot of people saying, why didn't you do a show last night? Last night you should have been doing it, blah, blah, blah. Well, other people were doing shows for starters. But on top of that, we like to digest things. We like to take it in. We like to make sure that what we're going to go out with is thought out. And, from our perspective, we know what we're talking about. And as most of you who've watched this platform for a long time know, I don't really say a great deal with regards to these particular issues because I'm not an expert at them. I can tell you about who played for Newcastle United and who I think should be playing. And I can tell you, all my various opinions on the team. But when it comes to this kind of stuff, I'm the same as everybody watching tonight. I'm looking for answers. I'm hoping that I can listen to these lads, talk some sense and make some sense of what is being said. So that is why I'm handing it over to the professionals. And Stu did ask if he could go first tonight. It's going to be slightly different. I'm not going to be going around the table like I usually do to try and, keep a little bit of calm. The lads are going to chip in as and when they want to, and they've all got a lot to say. So, Stu, over to you.
Well, the reason I asked to go first was because it's a happy occasion, and I've opened a very nice bottle of Spanish Faustino Primero, which got dusted out to celebrate. So I've got a few words to say, and if everyone can focus on Mr. Keith Patterson, I don't know if you can make him just on the screen, Steve, whilst I do this, but I think it's something that needs to be said. So I'm going to say, Keith, the takeover was 3 years ago yesterday, as you know, right? However, the battles and struggles and efforts have been nigh on for 5 years, because it was at least like 2 years beforehand. And the making, so many have pushed, many have contributed, but you, Keith, you've been the tip of the spear. Yeah, you had the same desire as 10,000s of Newcastle fans. You, like us, believed in the greater good. You believed in right beats wrong. You believed that it could be done, should be done. You believed it would be done. You believed as a fan base, we deserved it. You believed we all deserve better. But you and Gordon initially put your money where your mouth is. And for that, we should all be eternally grateful. You stood by your beliefs and convictions, and that, which was that anti-competitive behaviour cannot stand up in a court of law. And that would defeat the Premier League, and it did. And 3 years later, an anti-competitive case has highlighted corruption, collusion, and cartel behaviour, has just levelled the playing field. And we stand a good chance as any other team now of benefiting from that, Keith. And from the bottom of my heart, I want to say thank you. So I thought I'd start the show with that. because it's very, very important that people understand the role that you played and what's happening.
Appreciate it.
I just add this. What Keith also did was he introduced the words cat into the vocabulary of football fans all around the world. Because without Keith, I don't think many people actually knew what anti-competition competitive behaviour was. So I think we've got to thank Keith for that as well.
But and like I've said before, Keith, you know, Steve and I were very much at the forefront of trying to help Mr. Ashley on his way out of the club. However, whilst we did try to keep communication open and try to keep a dialogue there, and Steve in particular took some brickbats for that, you were the first person to come along and not say get out, but rather, is there any way we can help you out? And I think that was a very different tactic and a very smart move. And I think of all the things, that's the thing that's underappreciated for me, is that it's very, very difficult to work with someone that you desperately want out of your football club. As Steve and I were told at a meeting at the very early days of the trust by someone, if you're going to sit at the table and sup with the devil, you must use a very, very long spoon. And God knows what size spoon you must have had in the darkest of days, but it certainly worked, mate.
I appreciate it.
Massively. Yeah, I will add to the plaudits, Keith, and you know, we didn't know each other at all. Steve Hasty knew you quite well, and you know, we were grateful for your coming on board with us, but also your openness and honesty with us, because you had to put trust in me, Steve, Mitch in particular throughout that whole period, and hope that we weren't going to go off and say anything. You, like many people who hear the name Steve Wraith, were told various things, I guess, about me. We discussed this and laughed about it later on, but you didn't know whether you could trust me or whether I would go to run to the newspapers or put something out on a podcast or something. But the trust was built up over that particular period. And we ended up in a position where we then were almost felt as if we were beholden to you. And at one point, just right at the end, as my faith in the takeover dipped massively. I didn't think it was going to happen after more or less telling everybody to keep the faith for best part of 2 years, 3 years, and it became almost evident to me that it wasn't going to happen. But you still had the faith, and like everybody said, mate, we've said it before, we'll say it again on this platform. We are thankful for what you did, and you've played a huge part. And it's nice that when this kind of thing comes around, you're only too happy to jump on this platform and others to be able to talk about it. And you're still very humble, which is great. You didn't get the kind of plaudit that you should have of other people. So, from my perspective, well done, mate. And let's get down to business. Let's have a chat now about the news that came out, Keith. And I know many other people will have watched you on other platforms last night, but from our perspective, there'll be a lot of people who only watch NUFC Matters. So tell us what your initial thoughts were when that news came out yesterday.
First of all, before I do it, is just to thank you, lot, because without support, you're just a lone voice, and I've always maintained I'm just a fan. But I was fortunate that my working career took us into competition law, so I'd run a case which was probably 50 times bigger in my career that lasted several years, and I saw dealing with the cartel, so I knew what a car looked like and smelt like. So I was fortunate where the people thought I was probably making it up. It's easier if you've done something at work to carry it into your private life. And when it happened, I looked at things like age. I looked at the last time we won something, and I looked at the prospects the next time we ever would win something. And for me, I was in a fortunate position that I could invest monies. Looking back, I wish I'd put it into a box rather than into a court case, because the court case never ran. But I was assured by KCs, which are called King's Counsel now. The QCs at the time, because the Queen was alive, but Queen's Counsel, which are barristers, told me that your case wins, and that the 6 points that you created with barristers and paid for, it absolutely wins on 4 points. And it will try 2 other points to see how it goes on. And the Premier League answered us in a 14-page letter, and they answered 2 points, and there were the 2 that we thought were dubious. And we thought their attempt answer was a 3 out of 10.
So that evidence sits. Don't forget that evidence doesn't die. People say, would you use the evidence again? That evidence is held in several barristers' offices, several lawyers around the country have got that evidence, probably for my safety, because if anything happened to me, the evidence still runs on. But today you find yourself in a case where you've got Man City's evidence. So they'll have, and I'm not exaggerating here, millions, not hundreds of thousands. They'll have millions of documents in this case. That's how many documents they'll have scrutinised. And that evidence, everything that was published in this case, this report, becomes factual evidence. It's like a fingerprint. You can't get rid of it. But you've also got the evidence, the 90 gigabyte we built, which we passed to the Newcastle United, and they copied, duplicated and ran. And you saw how they embarrassed the Premier League in front of 33,000 of you people. And then you've got something called disclosure, which, if any of these cases or points we've just learned of in the last 24 hours run, you will then be able to go to the guy or the lady who ran that letter 5 days after the takeover Newcastle, and you'll be able to ask her, as part of the case, can you please explain your thinking behind lobbying 18 clubs? Because we understand they didn't lobby Man City and they kept Newcastle out the loop, but they lobbied, 17 plus their own. What were you thinking of, and what was your aim? And when that person would be compelled to say, in producing a letter on behalf of 11 clubs, 10 plus their own, they've committed Harry-Carry as far as the competition courts go, both in the EU and in the UK. And I'll explain later why they've done that. But that person, the courts decided that there was no attempt to rewrite PSR or APT until the takeover Newcastle. When that person decides to do that, they're compelled under competition law, whenever you've got a market in Britain which trades any money, you're not allowed to A, hold back a competitor, or B, side with another competitor. So two parties can never pick on one, ever. And when 11 parties pick on one, they're in trouble. And you just hope that if that ever happened, it would be done without any trace. But what's in a letter that's been subject to an arbitration court case, it's just categoric evidence. And I'll come on to it later as what that'll do. But a lot of people started last night by saying, did City win? And the first thing that everybody said, Kevin Maguire said last night, was City were vindicated in taking the action. So some people might say, why did City take it? So if we get out the way first, they took the action purely to assist them with their 115 charges. So the whole purpose of taking that action was to try and help their case against the Premier League, where the Premier League ultimately trying to, or let's say some of the Premier League's dominant players are trying to relegate Man City to say League Two. They were vindicated in this because if they run that 115 cases, and 30 of the points said that they didn't act quick enough and they wouldn't cooperate. So if Lord Panic, allegedly on 5,000 an hour, goes to the bench in the case and says, "Why did you not cooperate?" He's got an easy answer now. He just looks at them and says, "Well, Your Honour, I advised Manchester City that these people were unlawful, and that's been proven that they're unlawful, and that they were unfair people and they were acting improperly. And any information I gave them, they would pass to some of their people, which has been proved in the unlawful APT cases, where they're passing deals for each other, but they're holding back my deals. My clients' deals have been held back." I think 30 of those charges come out straight away. So I think it goes 115 down to 80, and I think it keeps dropping. And ultimately,
from what I've heard, Keith, it could go down to 70.
Yeah, and I think it'll drop. It wouldn't surprise me if the case doesn't end up at 40 points out to 115. And what's the relevance of that? So if you were running a court case and I was sat there and you said, "Oh, she nipped him, she kicked him, she bit him, she chucked a stick at him, she knifed him, she shot him," come on, what did she do? Well, maybe she spat at him once, but why did you say all that? Well, because I was annoyed. Is that not what the Premier League are doing now? The Premier League are not just absolutely chucking the kitchen sink at Man City and saying what sticks. Because if you do that in a court case, a judge will get tired and the judge will lose faith he'll always listen to every point, but he's not going to let tens of charges drop off and feel that he's against a sincere claimant, which is, in this case, the complainant is obviously the Premier League. They're the ones who are suing City, so they've got to prove the guilt. Now, if a lot of charges drop off, Man City start to win. And I think Man City won on several points. We understand today that Manchester City are contacting the other 19 clubs in the Premier League with a correct statement of what really was decided. And their lawyers will tell them why the Premier League's press release was wrong and why their assessment of the case is correct. And that is quite critical. So if you go on and say Man City were vindicated because, first of all, they proved that the Premier League had done things wrong, you can go to the next piece of proof, which is when anybody loses a court case, the successor normally claims damages or costs. And in this case, I've not heard anywhere where the Premier League are going to get any costs or damages, but I've heard plenty that Manchester City are. They've won the case, and it's them that will be paid the damages because they were the winners. In any court case, you won't win all your points. But remember later on is when you go in a full-blown court or an arbitration, you only have to win 1 point to win. This is the key to where we go, because ultimately this is all going to narrow down to how does Newcastle benefit, or how does Newcastle follow this on. So first of all, Man City's vindicated. You then go to Newcastle's favourite lawman, which is, I think everyone agrees, called Nick DeMarco, and he's involved in several cases at the moment, and people have tried to get him on various podcasts and comments, and he's just put a public statement out. It's critical that people understand what the statement says. He said the fact that the APT has been declared as unlawful is significant. Now, when a King's Counsel, probably the top 3 in his trade, puts a statement out that significant means not just it's going to reap change. I think from a legal perspective, it's going to be open to challenge. And I think it's going to be open to further attacks. And I think it's going to be open to be, let's just say for the purpose of tonight, smashed. I think the door's wide open, and I can see exactly where people can go from here to bring down this behaviour once and for all. So that's City being vindicated. The next thing that Kieran Maguire eloquently covered was the interest-free loans. And where that's relevant is Newcastle were one of the clubs that didn't have any interest-free loans. They had 0. But when you look at it, Everton had 451 million, Brighton 373, and Arsenal 259. Down to Chelsea, surprise, surprise, got 146 million worth of interest-free loans. So 14 clubs out of the 20 had interest-free loans. And the relevance isn't that they got the loan, the relevance is they didn't pay interest. And if you get an associated party, like a sponsor, giving you cash, which gets tested against your APT, the court has judged that you should also put any interest-free payments through there. So typically, do the sums, there's evidence out there that some of the clubs, and I believe Everton might have been one, and I believe Man United might be another, when their interest rates were in excess of 10%, because we know interest rates have been high. But if you just did it at 5%, and you said Everton, say over 3 years, had 451 million, do your sums quickly, that amounts to 22.5 million per year times 3, which is 67 million. Add that to a 105 million tolerance on PSR, and you think, shit, these are big numbers. So Newcastle had 0. They had no interest-free loans. So everything Newcastle done, they must have paid interest on at the going rate. But it tells you that the Premier League is allowed, and let's not beat around the bush. They've left one of their favourites, Arsenal, 259 million worth of interest-free loans. There's arguments they paid 1%, but they certainly never paid anywhere near the going rate, which is argued between 8 and 10% through this financial crisis. So Kieran Maguire thought that was massive. He thought it was a huge point, because are they going to backtrack And are they going to recharge them? Because surely in the Notts Forest case and in the Everton case, they went back over years of history. So are you going to tell me they're going to say to Arsenal, no, it's all right, you've had that interest free, we'll make a new rule for October 24, and you won't pay anything back and you won't be penalised. Now, if they do that, you can see a legal challenge coming there. You can see a legal challenge coming off clubs who didn't have those interests and who paid the going rate. So that there's challenges there. But I think that was one of the big wins of the court case. When you come down to what Newcastle gained out of it, the short word is evidence. So Newcastle gained. People, some fans have put stuff on to say, why Newcastle sitting back? And why Newcastle letting Man City do this? Why Newcastle not taking a court action? The simple reason they're not taking a court action is because they can't. When you join the Premier League, you sign to say you won't take a court action. So all you can take is an arbitration. Off the record, I don't think the arbitrations are particularly fair. I think the whole panel is one to you, one to the Premier League, and the third member chosen by the FA, which is the Premier League in my eyes. So I don't think the panel is duly fair and independent in that sense. However, they proved in the Leicester case and they proved in the City case that they are honest, good, solid, retired judges. There's a lot of people don't trust that process. Certainly when we did the takeover in Newcastle, we were of the opinion that if it went to arbitration, we'd lose 2-1. And there was a determination by the Premier League and by the cartel players to turn down the takeover. So we knew that we had to do it a different way, and we did it with the competition action. When you go back to this and you look at what Newcastle got, they got proof that something called the Newcastle rules exist. They also got proof that a director of a football club, bear this in mind, Mr. Herbert was asked to give evidence in the court case, and he gave evidence. So he was on oath, and he gave evidence to state that at no time, many times for several years, the Premier League had intended to amend, improve, and change PSR. So they were going to change the sustainability regulations. When it went to court, Manchester City challenged that. They said, well, we don't believe it, prove it. Now, if you've intended to do it, and if I intend to get Mitch and Steve Hasty to do something, I would write to you, or I would send you an email, or I would say, and I would prove that and say, well, that's the emails. Mitch and Steve were handling it, and that's when they did. I did it on that date, that date, that date. We had a meeting then. These are the notes. This is the plan. This is how we're going to change PSR. Our friend Mr. Herbert gave evidence, but couldn't show any evidence in the case whatsoever that anything had been done to PSR. He couldn't produce any written, verbal witness statements, any evidence to say, that's when we did it. There's my notes. There's the document. This is how we're going to change it. So Manchester City challenged it, and the panel found that up until the autumn of 2021, there'd been no visible attempt to change PSR. Now, if any of our fans are not familiar with the seasons of our year, autumn includes October. So put in our words, let's talk in Newcastle speak, up until October the 7th, 2021, there hadn't been an ounce of effort or intent to change the regulations. However, we have written proof now that 5 days later, a director not only has lobbied 17 of the clubs, he's actually got 10 of them to join his company and do a joint letter. That's illegal. It's illegal because, remember when I said earlier that two people can't go against one. Now, let's suppose those 11 clubs got in a meeting and start chucking pelters at Newcastle. That's illegal. But what is far more illegal is to run that meeting with your governing body and not invite Newcastle to the meeting. Criminal. Absolutely. Game, set and match. Good night, Eileen, you're knackered. And then he offers, good soul that he is, to volunteer some CEOs, was his words, to help rewrite the rules. And he urges the Premier League to make sure, in doing so, that they don't allow any deals on sponsorship until this meeting. And he asks for the meeting next week, but he can get that sooner if possible. But he couldn't do anything for several years before, as Mr. Bennett alleged. So you can see why Man City's drove a horse and cart through this. They knew what had gone on. They had a copy of the letter. They knew that it was bent. And they said, right, let's expose it. Let's bring these Newcastle rules out. And in that letter, I think it quotes Middle Eastern. So does it border on
Gulf region.
So does it border on racism, or is he from a particular area of the world where he wants to side with the people where he's? Who knows? I don't know if it's what I do know with absolute facts. I don't understand racism like that. What I understand with matter of fact is that he picked a territory in the world out to separate from the rest. And that's why Man City's case said, well, this is a case against the Middle East region. This is a case against that area. And it's typically Newcastle. But there's more people came forward and give evidence on behalf of Man City. And surprisingly...
We're back there to where this narrative that the Premier League seem to be, and certain clubs seem to be very happy to espouse, is that money from America is good and money from the Gulf is bad. And it fits entirely with the narrative that the Premier League want to give. And I've found it fascinating in the last 24 hours to see them pressing the client journalists into action. Yeah, Tarek Panyas and yeah, Javier Solid-Calls and yeah, the lad at the Telegraph and Adam Crafton, all coming out saying this is actually a win for the Premier League. It's not a loss, and it just means that the rules need tweaked, and that's all that's going to happen. The very fact that they're ignoring what most people can see, and we've understood for a long time, thanks to you in many ways, Keith, that on these points, all they need to do is lose one and the whole thing's blown apart.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how many wins you get, it's about the loss.
That's correct.
The losses that they've got are where City have ceded, yeah, you should have a regulatory framework. Brilliant. Yeah, okay, we agree on that. But where they've lost is in things like the way they manage the database to assess associated party transactions, and then how they've behaved in a directed manner to target certain clubs, and particularly Newcastle United. And it means the very fabric of PSR is in shreds now. It's lying in tatters because the means that they use to do the assessment have been totally blown apart and ruled unlawful. I think there's a growing opinion now that now would be the time to drive a coach and horses through it. That any deals signed in the next few weeks before they've even had a chance to reconvene would never be challengeable on a legal basis, simply because you can turn around and say, well, the rules weren't very clear at that time. And I think, whilst I'm quite sure would still be cleverer than that, there seems to be a growing opinion from people like Kieran Maguire that might be the way to go from here, is that we have a sort of a 2-week minimum window whereby it's time to make hay while the sun shines. And I do hope to see some sort of movement on that front. I think the other thing that we're looking at now is this exposure of. It's funny how we've, as a fan base, have been attacked by other fan bases in the last couple of years, and now everybody's starting to see what we've known all along, and now it's in writing, and now we're seeing the emails, as poorly redacted as many of them are. It's been a fascinating time, and I think that's why we're desperate to try and, as a fan base, to try and make a bit of sense of it about where we go from here. But I do think that, in a nutshell, understanding that PSR will never be the same again, and it could actually take months to get this back into place for the Premier League, because as you say, Keith, every time they make a change, there might be another club ready with another challenge. They say, well, hang on a minute. Can we go back a couple of years? You did this to us and you said that to us, and now you're changing your tune just because you've lost this case or these points in your network, your framework's been ruled unlawful. I think it's actually possibly going to get more complicated and more muddy before it gets clearer. But even more reason for us as a club to be using that sort of time of uncertainty to start to manoeuvre into a really strong and positive position going forward.
Yeah,
Mitch, allow me to interject there, because I want to simplify things, because that's how I live my life, as you know. For me, what the narrative's been pushed by the Premier League cohorts has been, and this is me putting it really simple, paying up front is bad, having Chucky is good, and that's the way they put it. But you mentioned the word redaction. I want to mention the word retraction, because I'm considering retracting my opening statement to Keith, because I'm a bit upset. My opening gambit there. He obviously hasn't read the new fanzine, because I can't write a letter as well, you know. It's not just you, it's not just me. I can write as well. So, no, but I want to go on and say, like, I'd imagine for me, the fans I've spoken, the general consensus of Newcastle fans is that they don't want or expect us to go gung-ho in the transfer market. But we're all ecstatic now that we seem to have the right to compete rather than be stifled by restrictive and now proven illegal rules, which were clearly introduced to protect the cartel. And this is something that you've been consistent on, Keith. And one thing I've said consistently is throughout my life is greed spoils everything. But if anyone believes that Man City have spent millions to win this case out of principle and not to introduce significant increased sponsorship, then these people are beyond help. You know, they haven't done it to win an argument. They've done it to put more money into the club to make them better. It's all self-service. Will Newcastle benefit from that? That's what we're all bothered about, and undoubtedly they will. However, I don't believe that the PF will provide Paul Mitchell with an open checkbook, nor do I think Eddie Howe would welcome such a thing. He wouldn't want just all these superstar talents getting dropped into his squad and say, right, we've spent this money, do this. But because it would just create, for me, Chelsea-like chaos in the dressing room. I do believe, though, that they'll be given the requested funds to obtain the players that they desire, and then we can grow organically, but at the rate we should have done once the takeover happened 3 years ago. And there's a big difference there. So will the PAF introduce sponsorships? Will they nudge some of their companies or people who want to do business with them our way? Absolutely they will. And that's why I put that tweet out last night. Peter Silverstone, you're front stage and centre. Now's your time to shine, because there's absolutely no way, as long as God made green little apples, that this will be finished with the Premier League by next week and they'll have a new set of rules in place. They will be scared to their wits' end that they'll be challenged again. So the door is open. How long it stays open for is anyone's guess. I'm more aligned with Mitch. It'll be a few months before they can come with something that they might see as waterproof. But ultimately, and maybe I'm positive, but putting a measure of realism there, I don't think all of a sudden we're going to get like £1 billion sponsorship by Aramco or another company associated with PIF, but we will be given enough to compete on an even playing field, and that's all we've ever wanted. You know, it's because for me it's been clear, and for everyone who's watched this channel over the last 5 years, they listen to anyone on this screen plus others who contribute. The way that it's been put across is the financial fair play was there to protect clubs, but they were protecting the wrong clubs. They weren't protecting the majority; they were protecting the minority, and they were limiting what the minority or the majority, which was the poorer majority, could actually do. You couldn't get better. You could have the odd Leicester, you could have the odd Newcastle, even last season the odd Aston Villa, but you couldn't have that on a sustained basis because you weren't allowed to spend enough money to stay there. So what realistically was happening, we were waiting for other teams to underachieve and us to overachieve. And if you're in any sport or any part of life where that's going on, it becomes too predictable and too boring. And now if it means Aston Villa can open their checkbook, if it means Forest Zona decides, do you know what, I'm going to pump another 200 million quid into this. If it means that we get £500 million, these figures are just for example, then I'm sorry, there was a little backwards and forwards I had with the Liverpool fan last night who was really upset with what the Man City fan had said. But Liverpool and Manchester United have generated more money than others for years, and they've been able to pick the cream of the best players from the other teams for as long as I've been alive. And Liverpool were heavily funded by the Littlewoods pools. And Manchester United have been a great club ever since, and I dare say, since the Munich air disaster. They gained a worldwide fan base that was passed through generation to generation. And it was all done to preserve that. But now, if someone wants to spend money, Jack Walker style, and get their team to win the league, fine. But we have more money than everyone else. Yes, we have. But I don't think PF will just do that just for the sake of it. They're not there. Remember, this is a business model for them. They want long-term sustained success to be at number one and to stay there. And just throwing a lump sum of money in it straight away is the quick way to the poorhouse. And these people are too business savvy to do that. But I will repeat that I genuinely believe they'll give us enough money to get to where we should be. And once we're competing, we're all on an even keel. Let's see who's got the best manager. Let's see who's got the best support. And let's see who isn't getting any favours put their way. Because then it goes back to the 70s in football, where Derby counties could win a league, Forest could win the league and the European Cup, Villa could win a European Cup. And that's been taken away. And from a personal perspective, I'm sick to the back teeth of people mocking Scottish football, saying it's always going to be Rangers and Celtic. Well, I tell you what, I'll have Man City or Arsenal this year if anyone else wants to have the rest of the other 18. And it's been proven in courts yesterday, or not yesterday, but it was announced yesterday that Arsenal were there on false merit. They were using what's been proven to be money that they shouldn't have been using. Yet we couldn't use debt-free money. They could use debt-free money to enhance themselves. And that's what had to change. And that's what Keith's been crowing on about for the best part of 5 years. And he's been proven right. And we all know he's been through so much crap, so much abuse, so much personal trauma to get to this stage. And I just think he has to be elated and vindicated. And I think now I need to be quiet and listen to Keith, because that's why people are tuning in.
Before Keith chips in, I just want to give an observation of what's gone on over the last sort of 24 hours. I mean, basically, Man City went to court and they committed themselves to challenging the EPL's commercial deals rules. That's all they wanted to do, and how it involved the club owners. That's what this whole thing, this APT is about. But the ignorance of the EPL is really inadvertently walked them into a defeat in that competition law, because they've been proved to be anti-competitive in the rules that the Premier League have set up. That was the first thing that grasped me. The other one was, we mentioned earlier that, and Mitch mentioned that, there seems to be a perception out there that US money is good and Gulf money is bad. We take that a stage further. In one breath, we hear that football's a sport. We hear a word sport and integrity mentioned. It's always mooted whenever it comes to talking about football. Yet when it suits them, all of a sudden the conversation switches and they're talking about it as an entertainment business. It's there to make money. And when it comes to the Americans, it's there to make money for the American owners. That's the way that it looks at. That's the franchise model that they have in America, and it's the model that the Americans are trying to bring over here. But what the Premier League have also done over the last 24 hours, and during the court case, and obviously the result coming out, is that they've walked headfirst into a bear trap. And the bear trap is independent regulation. The one thing that they've been fighting against for the last, 18 months, 2 years, is the implementation of the independent regulator. Not something that I'm pretty sort of enamored with myself, by the way, simply because I always felt as though it was something that the FA should be the role model. The FA should be the bearer of of all of that. But unfortunately, the FA 30 years ago sold its soul to the devil in the form of the Premier League. But that brings me on to the Premier League. And I sat there this afternoon and I thought about the Premier League and thought about the position. What I jotted down was that there's actually a huge flaw in the structure of the EPL. Because what it does is the structure itself invites anti-competitive cartel behaviour simply by the nature of a 20-member organisation with equal voting and a pass rate of 14-6. That's your pass mark that you've got to achieve. And with regard to voting in the key decisions and changes to how the organisation operates, yet as individuals, those same members are in a competition. And it's part of a big financial prize that they're vying for. And they're in a competition that, ironically, I mentioned the 14-6 specifically there, because ironically, invariably, there's only 6 winners in the Premier League. There's the six European qualification spots. That's all they're fighting about. The amount of money that the clubs get for where they finish in the league is incidental, because the big prize is the European prize. So we've got 4 Champions League spots and the 2 UEFA, and the throwaway sprat in the mix that goes to the other 14 is the conference. And even that doesn't necessarily go to someone of the other 14, but it goes to one of the top 6, one of the top 7, the one that invariably misses out in the first top 6. So this season it's Chelsea. The year before it might have been an Aston Villa, or it might have been a Man United or whomever. But that's the way, and it's a European safety net. The whole competition, the whole of the EPL is there to protect those top for in what I call a European safety net, and it's there for anyone who misses out on the Champions League spot. That's what those other 2 spots are for. It's all been structured like that, but now it's been exposed for what it is. And Man City have driven a coaching horses through the whole damn lot, and now it's going to create a maelstrom over the next few months, while the Premier League scramble to pick the bones of it and put it back together and realise that no matter which way they go, they can't actually put it back into the box. They can't. I don't think they're in a position to repair the damage. Certainly not in the 5 days that they're now claiming, or 7 days for this extraordinary meeting that they're claiming. Just because they managed to pull a Newcastle deal together back in 2021 in 5 days doesn't necessarily mean that can then put this one right in 7 days. Absolutely physically impossible, because
there's more chance of me and Keith having a perm bite in 7 days' time than
exactly
a calling poem. There's something else to think about is that when you think about when these rules were made, these PSR rules were made, let's go back 2020, 2021, they weren't stress tested at all. They never ever got stress tested. Kieran Maguire covered that site, he said they were just written, and they were written by the dominant people who run the Premier League. It was their rules. Yeah. They were put there not to stop clubs going bust, not protect people from financial challenges. They were there to protect privileges for this small group of people. Go back to what I said earlier, where we go back to a period where in October 21, they'd never ever looked at changing PSR for years, is what their key witness said. They'd never done it for years. But something must have happened on the 7th of October 2021 to change everything. So on that date, they triggered nothing happens for years, and then 5 days, 18 clubs get lobbied, a letter gets written, they create a meeting, have a meeting, and they don't invite Newcastle. So what happened on the 7th of October? Because when I go back to the 7th of October, I think what happened on the 7th of October 21, and all I can remember is that was the day when loads of thick Mappins and loads of thick Scousers and Red Manx and Londoners all graduated in their human rights. They all got honours degrees that day on the 7th of October. Something else must happen that day. There's something must happen significant in football that we aren't aware of that made all these changes come about. When Newcastle, let's suppose, and don't say whether this is the club or a sponsor or a former director that's left with the shares at less than what they should have got had this not have happened, or whether it's fans, but let's just call Newcastle as a group, take an action against this anti-competitive behaviour, they'll be able to sit there and say, can I see that letter, please? And can I see the WhatsApps where you contacted Fulham? And can I have the dialogue both ways, please? And it's not on one phone, it's on two phones. And it's on the next phone where the Fulham guy sent it to his three contacts and they sent it back. And the whole thing's like spores. It just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. It's uncontrollable and it's not hideable. And they'll say, right, can I see your notes? Can I see any text you did? Can I see any emails you've got? Can I see where you people contacted your lawyers? Can you tell us who went to the meeting? Who do you meet beforehand? What time do you get the meeting? Who do you travel with? And to where they build up something up, which is ultimately, it's a term you've heard me use before. It's where one or more parties tries to do down another party. But in this case, we've got 11. And what those 11 people did, they did something called collective lobbying. And if you go type that into Google, collective lobbying, you find out it's illegal. Highly illegal in the UK court and in the EU court. And that's what that director did. And that's what they got proof of yesterday. So that's why Newcastle are big winners out of this. There was a podcast I watched last night by LB, Man City fan. And he was screaming, saying, Newcastle people should be all over this like a rash. Because if you don't realise how badly treated you've been and how much you've been discriminated against and colluded against, you'll never get it. This is massive what's happening in Newcastle. And then we say what happens next. So we go to a KC, one of the best in the country, Nick DeMarco. He says to you, he's telling you, this is significant, that APT is unlawful. So that means it has to change, but it doesn't have to get tweaked. If they couldn't write it in 2021 with no pressure, they're not going to write it in a week. And whatever they write is going to get challenged. But he's telling you that there's a massive opening there.
Yeah.
But bigger than that for me, bigger than that, that's just going to change the way you comply with PSR and the amount of sponsorships you can put through. But what's bigger than that? How would you drive a coach and horses through this? You'd get a body that could take an action, and we know clubs cannot. So then you say, well, if clubs can't take an action, because this doesn't want to run through an arbitration, this goes through an arbitration, there's a risk you get a difficult panel. We don't want that. This has got to go through a court of law. Just remember, in a court of law, if you win 1 point, you win. And when you go in a court of law and you say, Your Honour, I put forward to you that on this 24th of 2024, this director of this Premier League team lobbied it at least 17 of the clubs. He didn't lobby Manchester City or Newcastle because he was against Middle Eastern investment. And what he did...
Sorry, was the original lobbying not coming from the chairman of beIN Sports when he wrote to all the clubs?
That lobbying of beIN Sports is what we took in our case, and we tested that, and that was 3 years ago. This is just
another example of lobbying.
The collective lobbying which we've got, which is still live and which will still win a court case of anti-competitive behaviour. But on this one, you've got something where after Newcastle takeover came off, you had 18 clubs being lobbied, 11 agreeing to carry out an illegal act in UK business of trying to condemn one party and going to a meeting where a party wasn't present and delivering illegalities. That's what they are, the unlawful practices where it's illegal to actually think of pulling the stunt on one of your competitors, to actually carry it out, put it in writing and tell the Premier League that your directors will volunteer on a free of charge basis to help you write the rules. You know, it seriously is. I don't think the case would run. I think that if a body, and I'm going to come back to that again, could get this case exactly like we did, NCSL, we got a case of 6 points through a KC, we built it into an action, and we sent a letter for action to the Premier League. If a body could do that, and a group could do it, the first thing the Premier League did with us was they come back and said, you've got to prove that you've got the costs. You've got to prove you've got costs to run a case, which in our case was $250,000, and you've got to have proof that you can defend a case, because if you lose, you've got to pay the legals. So you don't just have to come up with enough funds to pay your barristers, you've got to have enough funds to pay your barristers and pay theirs if you lose. So you really have got to prove you've got too lots of money. For something like this, it would be a CAT case, which is an appeal tribunal, which is a much faster track. Any competition judge, I think, in the country would say it's a matter of public interest, and then he would make it public, and it would be expedited, and it would be run out in public against the Premier League's wishes. Now, the Premier League stop all of their cases in arbitration being run publicly. It's one of their rules, and they delay. So they always delay, and they always run it slow, and they hide it. With this, the judge would demand it's made public. It's a matter of public interest. And if a load of fans got sick of this, and those fans came together and started to, fans from Aston Villa, Everton, Forest, Manchester City, Newcastle, it goes on, doesn't it? Because there'll be more, and there'll be people sitting there saying, well, I don't want to work in a league and get a season ticket every season when I could never, ever compete with this cartel, or I never compete with what was the Big Six. So they decide to put some monies in. The only thing that then needs to happen is them clubs who stand to gain so much, so them clubs who don't compete in the European places, but all of a sudden would be able to spend the same amount on players, would be able to get the same amount of sponsorships, would sit there and think, hold on, this completely changes our business model. If a man Murdoch had sold their shares and this was open play, Newcastle's value would have been treble, and them shares would have been so much more. So if fans came together and did an action, and the clubs donated towards the action, the club said, hold on a minute, and I'm talking petty cash. A club the size of Newcastle, Man City, $1 million's petty cash to them. But if they put $500,000 in each, and 4 of the clubs did, and then fans just kept putting the 5s and 10s in, and what happened is it would gain enormous publicity. It would become an action demanded by the courts to be run very quickly and very publicly because of public concern. And all they would have to do.
A question, because I was asked this question.
Let's finish this one point. All they would have to do is just run one point and say, we believe at Newcastle United there were some rules made to stop our club, and it was done by a director of one club, and he got 10 to support him. And he came up with an agreement, and 5 days later, they wrote some laws which an arbitration is proven lawful. That's collective lobbying, game over. The case is over. So really, in essence, you wouldn't have to raise the fees to pay their costs, because you could never lose it. If you could just get this into court, you then rewrite the terms of the Premier League, you rewrite the terms of PSR, you rewrite the terms of the APT, and you rewrite any cartels that ever think that they get so much more money. Look at the Champions League, how much people get for past performances. It's all based on historic things. But now it should be an equal field. Basically, if you qualify, you get that. And if you don't qualify, you get nothing. That's what should happen. But at the minute, it's all anti-competitive. And if a fan's national group, I mean, I know which barristers have actually tested to see whether fans have got standing as loss makers, and they've proved that they're very, very happy to say fans do have standing and fans could take an action. So where the Premier League are comfortable, clubs can't take them on, they should get uncomfortable over this last week, because they've now been decided legally there's a case for fans to take an action. Personally, it's a massive thing. It took 3 years out of my life. It took a crazy number out of bank accounts. A colleague dropped out with a year to go, and he'd spent 5 figures. It's big money. So it's not something you want 1, 2 or 3 people doing. It's something you want a national action. And you want these clubs that's got so much to gain, but remember, so much to lose if the cartel continues, to contribute. It's a public fund. You can put an anonymous amount into that, but the clubs need to tell the fans that they're going to back them to do an action. And I could show the people, A, where the evidence is and put it on a plate, B, where the lawyers that will win the case are ready to go. And it would need an organisation to collect the money, raise the money, account for the money, say what's going to happen with funds that aren't used, decide which charities are going to get, and it's not a he's got the biggest balls competition. You'd need a chartered accountant sitting in charge of the money. You'd need a banker involved. You'd need IT to show every single penny that came in was done and dusted. Because the minute where you get money and you've got no records, you risk fraud. But it can be done. And the only thing I'll say is, if it was done, take what Nick DeMarco said today in public. He said it's unlawful and it's significant, and that in legal terms intimates that a challenge of it would smash it. And to me, I don't think it's anything about other than they've just proved collective lobbying yet again in public with a document. So it's game over for me. But whether or not it happens, and whether or not, for example, Newcastle United would back a fund, or whether, I think Man City would. I think they've intimated that they're prepared to go again.
Okay, interesting stuff. We already an hour into the show. I will come to you, Stu, in a second. I mean, look, we've got so many questions to get to. We might slightly extend it. I did say we're going to finish bang on 7:30. Keith said, good luck with that. 7:30 in the morning. If the lads want to drop off at any time, feel free to. I think we'll go at 8 o'clock. I'm not going to go past 8. We'll do half an hour more, because I've got about 17 or 18 questions, none of which has been covered. And that makes it 18 because Stu's got one as well. So, Stu, go on, ask your question.
It was only just like, can you stop talking for a second so I'll go to the toilet, but it's okay. No, that's not the question. That's not the question. I'll just have to get the mop out in the morning. I was asked a question today from a worldly wise, very good friend of mine who lives in a town in South Lancashire called Morecambe. No, it's not Tyson Fury. He's actually got a more effective punch than him, to be fair. But the question was regarding when you were talking about, Keith, about the collective lobbying and like the fans could set up, because I know you've mentioned this a few times over the years, but it's come to the fore again yesterday and today, or since yesterday's news, that if the fans put a case together, because we know that the club can't actually take him to court, like a civil court. But they can through an arbitration case. But if the fans put it together and raised enough funds to get a KC, the question I really want to ask is, and you might not even know the answer, but how long do you think it would take to get an outcome? Because you can imagine the opposition kicking that down the road until they run out of money.
Right.
You know, so let's just say 500,000 was raised. Could they kick the can down the road to the point where it's 2 years down the line?
No.
And we're no further off, and we run out of
Not
funds.
a chance. Not a chance. There's no competition judge would allow a crowd fund and public to raise monies for something which has already been tried in arbitration and described as unlawful, to stay unlawful and allow it to be delayed. They would do what's called case management very early on and stipulate the times. If you said to me, a case like this, in view of what's being given and how many points, I suppose we say we're going to stick to 6 points. We know we win all of them. And you can say, right, we'll have the behind collective lobbying from them, we'll have the collective lobbying from that. That's 2, and we're going to run 4 more. You run 6 points, you could run that case and have it heard, decided in 6 months.
Right. And that would
I believe you could probably, if things went your way, you could get it done in 3 months. But allowing 6 months, I don't think the judge, or I don't think the fans, barristers would let it go any longer.
So
what would the outcome be then?
The outcome would be that the court has greater jurisdiction to apply the penalties. So the penalties include 10% you will turn over. So they could in effect fine all those 11 clubs that produced that action of Newcastle rules against Newcastle. if that was the thing you pleaded, and they could take all them clubs. So it's up to 10% of your world turnover, annual turnover. Now, you know, it's up to, didn't say you get that. It also includes strike-off for directors and includes imprisonment in severe cases. So it's bad. But the big thing that's more important than all that, figure out, that doesn't excite me. What excites me is that a competition action wouldn't allow the rules to come from yesterday's arbitration to, oh, you need to have a look at them over the next week or so. A competition action drives a coach and horses through it, and all the rules that are corrupt or anti-competitive change. They get rewritten, smashed to pieces, and they'll have to do them. Otherwise, they weren't fit to govern the Premier League.
Which takes you back to my statement, which was that the Premier League's a busted flush now, because
I think it's right. I think it's right. I think that's what Nick DeMarco's saying. And Kieran Maguire last night said it's in a very precarious position because it's rushed some rules through. This judgment said that your original and amended associated party transaction rules are both unfair and unlawful. Both the amended ones and the ones before that. That's 2 attempts they've had it right in them. So are they going to get it right the third time? Because I'll tell you something.
And they're not going to do it in a week.
And there's going to be some guns pointing at them when they bring them out to say, you know, do you think they're passed? So when people say, see, I respect, I've got mates who phone me and say, are we signing Mbappe on Saturday? Who are we getting in January? And I got asked on a podcast, I said, who would you sign? And I wasn't really expecting that because I think more longer term. I'm not thinking of who we sign in January, albeit it's relevant. I'm thinking of, can you stop the existence of a cartel in football? Can you get it where there isn't a big six, or there isn't a red cartel, or there isn't these people? Like, you go to the Champions League, they go to the Champions League, you get knocked out at the same time, they get 3 times as much money because they used to be big, or they usst to be good, or they used to have a head start. I just want to see a level playing field. And if someone said to me, how much would you like to spend at Newcastle? I said, I don't want to spend $1 billion in January. I'd like to spend 300 million per window and bring 3 proper players in and build a squad up. So you go from your 5 gems to 8 to 11, and you lose 2, you're down to 9, you're back to 12, and you build a squad of 15. Like Man City, you've got a tremendous squad. I want to see something like that.
That's the point. Like, they were allowed to.
Yeah, and Chelsea were allowed to.
Yeah.
Okay, I tell you what, lads, you've had an hour's chat. Let's have a quick ad break. We'll be back after this. A big thanks to all our sponsors, Skips and Bins. You can find them at skipsandbins.com. Contact them, www.skipsandbins.com/contact. Say hello to low-cost waste disposal with pay-as-you-go and contract waste management. A big thanks to Mr. Vicky's Sauces, handmade in Cumbria. Their website, mrvickies.co.uk. Telephone 01768 210 102 or email info@mrvickies.co.uk. Thanks to our NUFC Matters fanzine sponsor, United Group Travel. Travel and Tourism Award winners 2024. There are no strangers on our tours, just friends you haven't met yet. All excursions included, 3-star plus quality hotels, no interchanges, a 2-crew driver and courier. It's a local family company, and you can find them at www.unitedgrouptravel.com or telephone 01670 632 460 or mobile 0791 666 4174. Big thanks to Media Arts for all the help with the technical side of things. And if you want to help support the channel, hit the subscribe button. We do 7 shows a week. Hit the thumb up under the video. That's the like button. It does help us grow. And click the share button. Help share to your social media. If you want to join the channel for as little as $1.99 a month, then hit the join button under this video today. We also help the food bank on this channel. Visit nufcfansfoodbank.co.uk. It takes you to the matchday bucket where you can donate some money virtually. Some events for your diary in aid of Dementia Matters. The Long Sands will be reforming, and
Be supported by Lilac Lane and the Chris Norris Band at the Cluny in Newcastle on Saturday, January the 4th, 2025. Tickets are £15 pre-sale from newcastlelegends.com. An evening with Peter Beardsley takes place at the Tyneside Irish Centre on the 10th of January 2025. Tickets available from newcastlelegends.com or from Woucher. And an evening with the Entertainers takes place on the 24th of January 2025. Telephone the box office 0844 249 1000 or visit the website tynetheatreandoperahouse.uk. And the Magpie Lounge at Gateshead Leisure Centre is now open. 7 talk-ins for £99. Joe Allen will be hosting talk-ins with Lee Clark, John Anderson, Steve Howie, Darren Peacock, Supermac, Steve Watson, John Beresford, all between the dates of January and July. £99.
Okay, and don't forget as well, we are promoting the book which Will Scott is bringing out, which is about the Entertainers. It comes out the 30th of November, and that is the Entertainers 1992 to 1997, Kevin Keegan's legacy. Interviews with over 30 players and staff. The book is $13.99, and it is available on newcastlelegends.com with a donation going to Dementia Matters. So please order your copy. Great idea for Christmas and that coming up. And Derek Wright has also got a book out at the moment, and he is doing a talk-in at the Irish Centre, newcastlelegends.com. That involves a talk-in, a one-off talk-in with Derek, who was our wonderful physio for many years, and also includes a copy of the signed book. And Lennox Lewis is going to Gateshead Leisure Centre. For tickets, contact Gateshead Leisure Centre direct or go to www.goldstarpromotions.co.uk. Lennox is in Gateshead on the 5th of November. Okay, got plenty of questions. I'm just going to run through a couple of them to give you a flavour, Keith. You know, and the lads. We're never going to get through all of these, but a lot of people wanting to know: does this mean the end for Richard Masters? Will he resign, or will he be sacked? Many people also asking, Keith, and feel free to jump in, lads. That's what it's all about tonight. Do people think that Amanda and Mirdad could sue for the Premier League for loss of earnings from the shares that they sold to Newcastle? The sale of their shares. Other people thinking potentially, like Roger Cook, is there a chance that the 0% loans could get written off? And Rich Joblin asked the question before: why has the document been redacted? Why haven't they been named and shamed? If it was proved unlawful, it seems strange. And Century Bat wanted to know if the tax revenue department would be interested in all of this. So lots of questions coming in. As I say, we're not getting
a lot of them are answered quickly. Roger, as far as them withdrawn, there's every chance the Premier League will realise that, for example, suppose Arsenal's going to put them over PSR for argument's sake. There's every chance that they'll create a rule, and you've got to remember the Premier League are really the dominating companies out of the 20. The Premier League are just clubs, so it'll be the ones with the biggest mouths, and we all know who runs the Premier League, and we all know who recruited Richard Masters. So I don't think it's unthinkable that they would scrap any penalties on the interest charges to date and start them from tomorrow. So there's every chance that they pull, which is a stinker if they do. And they, somebody called Little FB put something in where they said, can you explain what a body is? So a body is somebody that takes the Premier League to court, or it's somebody that takes these clubs to court. And it can't be a club. So what is a body? It's one or more people that come together and can demonstrate they've suffered a loss. They can show funds to be able to run the case, and they can provide evidence to win the case. So that's what a body is. A body is somebody, and the biggest qualification before a Competition Act runs, you've got to demonstrate a loss. So somebody's mentioned, could Amanda Murdoch do it? I spoke to a lawyer today that's worked in competition, and he said he imagines very much there'll be a lot of KCs would run that action, that if they were to do it, imagine if they did it, and Pip said, oh, I'll tell you what, we'll fund it for you. You take the case on, and you run this case where you've been done out because your share's worth a lot more. I think that's got legs, and I think they can definitely determine a loss. So I think that's definitely a route that could do it, and it would be very clean. Whether or not there's that agreement and that comfort, whether they do it, another thing. But it's the some people talk about a video that you should see as well. There's a guy called LB, a Man City supporter, did a video last night. Watch it, because he's put a lot of these points over and telling you why, as Newcastle fans, you've been done out. This case has proved. He's actually said that this case proves that we've been worse done out than City, and City ran the case. But remember why City ran it. City wisely ran it to get the evidence for the big case, and I hope they win it. You know, if they don't win it, we stuffed. But what you should do, we should have a look at who gave evidence to the Premier League against City. That was staggering. So people who support the EPL were Man United, Arsenal, Liverpool. What a shock! But then listen to this: Wolves, West Ham, Bournemouth, Brentford, Fulham. What the hell on earth are they thinking about? Where are they confirming they don't ever want to compete and they don't ever want to be top six? Or are they being incentivized, or do they know something we don't? I mean, it's unthinkable where the likes of Bournemouth that hang around the bottom of the league, and Brentford's been down there, where they think that allowing this cartel, this anti-competitive arrangement to work goes in their favour. Because I just don't get it. I don't get it. If they got bought over, typically Everton didn't give evidence because their new owners apparently are going to have a right go at it. They're going to put proper money into it.
You know, that one of the biggest surprises, Keith, is that Tottenham weren't one of those teams.
Yeah,
Sorry. That was one of the biggest surprises to me.
Yeah.
But with the other ones, maybe they're happy with the status quo because they know they'll never, even with an open playing field, an open checkbook, whatever, they know they can never reach the higher echelon. So they're comfortable with what they've got. What they don't want is teams below them, such as Forest, possibly Everton with new investment advancing above them. And
apparently West Ham's supposed to get new investment, and the word is they'll change. You know that their whole dramatic where they've supported the Premier League will change under new ownership.
Yeah.
Okay, Mitch, it's not very often on your own show that you can't get a word in edgeways, but it's not a night for that. It's not a night for that. It's great to have Keith on because Keith's in demand. Lots of people would like him to go on the podcast, but he's very loyal to us and loaded, of course. And from our perspective, it's just great to sit and listen to him because it gives us a bit of food for thought, doesn't it?
It does, and I'm very happy just to nudge things along like I did before, to just bring it down to where sometimes people need a pause to simplify it and take in what's being said. Everybody wants a nutshell of it, and it's very hard to condense a lot of this into a nutshell. Particularly, and again, I come back to it, when everybody's got their client journalists telling one story, and I mean, you couldn't see a story reported more differently than by 4 journalists against another 4. It makes that reporting of the press conference that the regional journalists had with Paul Mitchell look almost consistent. The totally diametrically opposed in every bloody way you can get. But that's what the Premier League want. The Premier League want everybody to think they're still in charge. While, they're sipping on their coffee while the coffee shop's burning around them, telling everybody everything's fine. And it couldn't be further from fine. There's a gaping big hole, and they've been proved for a second time this season that their rules are either unlawful or they can't apply their own rules in a timely fashion or in a proper and fair fashion. And so the bigger picture on this for me is where do we go and how do we time any intervention at the moment to get the maximum out of it for Newcastle United? That don't really give a monkeys about any other team. But this does have implications for us and does potentially have positive implications for us. I think Martin Samuel's got it right today, and I don't say that very often.
I agree with you.
And that he is absolutely correct when he says this is the death knell of PSRs. We know it. And it absolutely is.
Has to be.
It totally is. And we can only benefit from that. And equally, as fans, we sometimes want to get our pitchforks out very, very quickly Whereas Pith are playing a much bigger and longer game and a cleverer game at that. So I'll be very interested to see over the next couple of weeks how quietly and efficiently we go on about the business, or at least I hope we do. I really hope we do, because there's opportunities here, and that's what I've been picking up on today in a few conversations I've managed to have with people. Kieran Maguire in particular seems very much of the opinion, Newcastle, do your deals now.
Yeah.
And with regards to the clubs with owners' loans, a lot of people are saying, oh, well, they cannot retrospectively apply stuff. Well, they did Everton when they were docking points off Everton. They did the Forest when they were docking points off Forest, and they wanted to Leicester, and then wanted the EFL to do the EPL's dirty work for them. So they can do what the hell they want when it suits them. And
Steve,
that's again, is the problem with the laws.
Answer that.
You'll have to remember it, mate. I was just going through them, so I can't. It was about 20 minutes ago.
All right, okay, I'll have to find it.
I think what you also remember, Mitch, is that originally the EPL board were happy with the way that Everton were being run. They were happy for them to take loans. They were happy for all of that. And then all of a sudden, something changed, and they went, "Oh no, we're not happy anymore." And that caused the downfall of Everton, if you like, as well. And it's the double standards. It's almost like a double accounting rule, isn't it? When it suits them, they've turned a blind eye. Or when
well,
they
look,
do,
it's the same as the way they've treated Chelsea and their hotels.
yes.
That they want to say that the hotel sale falls within PSR, but if they went and then purchased the hotels, it wouldn't. So what's to stop them from selling it back and forth to themselves every season to balance their books? Because there's technically nothing to stop them from doing that in the way the rules are applied and written.
When they've done it 5 times, they'll suddenly go, "Oh, this isn't really fair anymore, lads."
You know, and we now see why suddenly Everton's takeover is looking likely to happen, because the money owed to 777 partners is now owed to an administrator. And you talk about loans and what's fair percentage. I hadn't realised 777 partners currently have a loan with one of Todd Bowley's companies, ironically, at 46%.
Yeah.
Just unreal. And so you're looking at sort of other clubs and how they've been treated. I've come to the conclusion the only thing that should come out of this is Everton need to be docked another 8 points. There'll be somebody in the Premier League will be desperate to dock Forest 2 points out the back of this Man City case as well, just because that's the only thing they know what to do.
Spenny's just said on there that Aston Villa are already putting 50 million at the club in shares. And Kieran Maguire's just reported. So again, it's like you were just saying earlier, Mitch, and Stu and Steve. You all said that about acting quickly, as Kieran Maguire said, get your deals in now, because it's in disarray. There's a guy just asked a question. Craig Lane's just said he's asking, will one email do it? I'll put it in really our language, Craig, is Newcastle put a case together, because Newcastle can't run it. So, but supposing us fans got together, we ran a competition action. Newcastle and Man City lobbed in some donation, and we had enough money to show the lawyers we could pay them. We run a case, and it basically says, Craig, we're not happy because we got took over on the 7th of October, and by the 12th, he got all them 10 to write a letter to go to a meeting to stop us getting our sponsors. And we think that's anti-competitive. And at that meeting, we weren't even invited. And they called them the Newcastle rules, and we only found out about them 3 years later, and we wondered what had happened. But now we know that's collective lobbying. Yes, that wins you a competition action. They will not defend that in a competition action. That's where 11 parties have tried to hurt one. But worse than that, they've lobbied 18. So it's just classic idiocy and collective lobbying, and it wins a competition action, Craig, that on its own. So that's why if let's suppose 4 companies in Newcastle came and said, well, we're going to sponsor an action, they could do that, and they could sponsor the fans to take a public action. It's the kitty, the fun that you need to do it. Back in the day, I was daft enough with another fella to do it on our own money. Thank God it never ran.
Who's got the biggest problems, lads? Who you know with this? We are hoping that we are hoping that Newcastle are going to be the biggest winners out of all of this, and Man City fans certainly seem to think we are. But I mean, when you see this, I mean, you know, that's been doing the rounds, been quite self-explanatory. Premier League clubs' debt to their owners. This table shows shareholder loans at the end of the 22-23 season. The vast majority of these can be described as soft loans from a club's own shareholders with a flexible repayment date or interest-free. Is that, in essence, the league table of who's got the biggest problems?
No, that's the people who's got the immediate challenge from APT, because they haven't included the interest of them loans. So Everton, however long they've had that 400 million loan, haven't been paying interest on it. The owners have given it interest-free. So if the Premier League was legitimate, it should tomorrow go from Aston Villa, well, Fulham up over, Fulham's got $1 million, and then get them 14 clubs say, right, we now want the interest from all that money for the duration you've had it pouring onto your PSR. And let's see who's complied and not. I mean, Newcastle's got nothing to worry about.
Keith, imagine that table 5 or 10 years ago when Abramovich had Chelsea and these rules were in place. The rules that are in place now, or that have just been blown up yesterday, were in place then. Chelsea would have been put in the Conference League. They would have been deducted so much.
Would have been $1 billion.
Was he 1.2 billion? He sponsored
interest free. So 10%, 1.2 billion is at I can't work out. It's 12 million or something. But what I'm saying is, when you put that against an allowance of 105,000, you're shafted. But that whole table, that's what Roger Cooper was on about. Roger Cooper was saying, do you think they'll write all that off? All that interest needs to come back in, because all them clubs in black have had an advantage of interest-free loans off an associated party, whether it be a director or a shareholder or what. They've had a cushy loan. Those clubs that's got zero next to them, the bottom 6 at the bottom, they've paid interest at the going rate. They've got loans from banks and whatever.
Interesting stuff. Lots of comments coming in, lots of questions coming in. Barry Hogan is probably either fallen asleep or missed your comments, Stu, about about the new stand in Leazes Park. I mean, it's a conversation about the freeman of the city. I mean, it's been discussed on other places. Maybe this is the reason, and I'll come to you, Steve. You're on the bottom row there, haven't had much chance to contribute tonight. Just, the conversations that have been, had or haven't been had yet. It's academic at the moment. Maybe Newcastle have been waiting for the, like we've said all along on this show, waiting for the results of Man City's, court case before they decided what the next step is, which would make complete sense on all factors, whether they build a new stadium, whether they don't. But I will reiterate what I've said on this channel for the last few days, and that is that we don't speculate on here. We try to give our opinion on stuff that we hear. But if we think it's going to mislead fans, we tend to swerve it like you would roadkill in the road. So, from my perspective, just give us, if you remember what Barry's question was, he was just saying, is that something that's likely, the discussion with the freeman of the city, etc. What's your overall view? And do you think that the Saudis have waited for this court case to come to an end before they decided what was going to happen?
Yeah, I think, it would just be common sense, wouldn't it, to wait? Big organisation's not going to throw all its hands into the ring if it thinks that there's something potentially coming over the hill that's going to stamp on them. So yeah, I mean, it's inevitable that PIF will have been sitting back and waiting for the outcome of whatever Man City are caught up or were caught up in. The main thing is that now that things are coming to a head, it's how PIF react. I mean, I think it's probably a bit early in the day to start talking about, right, well, we'll go out and we'll build on Leazes Park, or we'll build in Gosforth, or we'll move over the river to Gateshead and turn Gateshead into some super stadium. We've had all of these. This has been mulling around for God knows how long, but it's purely speculative, and nothing's come out of the club. Nothing will come out of the club. they've laid it on the line. I think just a couple of days ago when they met with the fans advisory board members, and it was reported on the club website that they're not in a position to say anything, not in a position to make any decisions, and it's going to be probably January, February before they even get to the point of talking about what is and what isn't feasible. So, and I've seen various podcasts just today, and I saw one who's categorically saying that there's been no conversation taking place whatsoever. If that's his information, then again, that just, I suppose, backs up what I'm saying, that the club's keeping everything very, very close to its chest, as are all the others. They're all keeping everything wide open, whether it's the Freeman of the City or whether it's the council or whatever. Eventually, these people will be getting together. There will be decisions that need to be made, and I think you've also got to remember in business that lots of things happen unofficially. A lot of things go under the radar. A lot of conversations happen outside of the circle, if you like, and a lot of people do talking for other people as well. So that's the way that business operates.
That's just the point I was going to make there, Steve. I think we've seen in the last couple of weeks a lot of assumptions being made about who may be speaking to who and why. And you're right, discussions on behalf of other people, or in a roundabout way, there's so many different people have so many more people have skin in the game than people realise.
I think it's a bit like a stonemason, isn't it? You keep chipping away and you keep chipping away. You can eventually turn around and say, "Oh, I think he's making a bust of this, or he's making a model of that." But until you actually see the finished model, you haven't a clue what that person's actually creating. He's just hammering away with a mallet and a chisel at a bit of stone, and that's all. That's where we are. And everybody's making assumptions on what the creation is going to be when it's finished. But
a lot of people, Steve, are saying though that the club hasn't acted quick enough, and that troubles me a little bit. Not that it's wrong, or you shouldn't say it, but I sat and looked and thought, have the club acted quick enough? So the club, if they took the action rather than Man City, because there's obviously got to be rumour of what's going on, and we'd heard the phrase Newcastle rules before this hearing, had we not? So yes. Newcastle go into court and they say, I'm taking action because I believe there was a meeting held, and I heard that at that meeting everyone was lobbied, and they created something called Newcastle rules, and they all voted against us, and we weren't invited. It's a lot of hearsay.
Yeah.
Because when you've heard something, it's worthless in a court of action. Hearsay is never the same. So Newcastle don't have any evidence, and they sit back, or maybe they were told by Man City, we're going to run action and it involves you. Let us run this action. How do you know that didn't happen? But then they go in and they say, we got this letter off that club there, and 11 of them come together and lobbied against Newcastle. That's much more damning and secure critical evidence than Newcastle in sitting down and letting Man City take the action with the proof and the fact that Man City were personally lobbied or Man City were personally invited. Newcastle weren't even there. So how could Newcastle take a case about the meeting they didn't attend? So you've got to cut Newcastle some slack on that maybe they're the most astute operators in the world at just collecting evidence, because I think yesterday they collected a bucket full.
The thing I find amusing is we got hammered by some people the first time we used the phrase Newcastle amendments. Now everybody's wanting to use the phrase.
You've also got to remember what you said there, Keith, was that Newcastle weren't in the room. Man City were. Man City straight away had the evidence. They had the letter.
So why then do some of us criticise them for not taking the action Man City taken? They had the evidence, we didn't. It was quite logical.
You don't buy a dog and bark yourself. Me and Mitchell vouch for this living over here. Saudis are the king pins in this region, and trust me, it could be a bit of cozying up or whatever, but they will sit in the background, and trust me, they won't bark. They'll bite when they have to, And I think the way things are panning out, they'll never have to bite. And it's just like some little kid, snotty-nosed kid at school picking fights with people, knowing that his brother's the toughest in the school, and saying, well, have a fight with me because look what's coming. And the Premier League, if they thought they had trouble with Man City, God help them. If the PAF really, really got themselves angry, it would change the global way people look at football, and that's not what they want. All they've ever wanted is to put their name on the map. People will call it sport washing, but that's just people, for me, who are uneducated or xenophobic or whatever you want to call it. What the Saudi vision is to improve or to make sure by 2030 more than half of their GDP is not oil dependent. And if you've got a leading sports team in the wealthiest sport in the world, then that's going to generate money globally, and they'll happily fund it, knowing long term that they will do patient. If we go back 20 years, we used to call it the Japanese way. You know, it used to be British used to want short term gain. The Japanese business people were prepared to sit and wait. The Saudis have mastered this, and that's something that they're more than capable of winning. They could destroy the Premier League, and I genuinely believe that, but they don't want to. What they want is to be able to compete. And I know you said hearsay before, but I was never a fan of them. But I don't think they'll fast track in an unacceptable way. You know, they'll be able to. I think whichever way they do it, whether it's through the new stadium, which for me is inevitable, or whether it's through new sponsorship or inputs of cash or whatever, it'll be done in an acceptable way where people will look at Newcastle United and think, do you know what, fair play to them. They went about it the right way. They didn't do it the Chelsea way. They didn't do it Man City way. They didn't do it Blackburn way. They've grown, and I hate using the phrase organically, but they've grown and grown and grown, and they deserve the success, and it'll be a sustained success, and that's what they're looking for. So ultimately, they'll end up having a business that will continue to have money poured into it, but it won't be their money, and that's when they can start taking the money out.
It
sounds
good.
Guys, I'm going to dip out. I'm going to have to dip out. I just say to everybody, thanks for listening. I'm over my time limit, if you know what I mean, and I need to get somewhere else. So all the best, and I'll catch up with everybody on Friday.
See you
Take
Friday.
care, lads.
I tell you what, I was going to get some closing comments from everybody anyway. It wouldn't be a show without Keith if I didn't just say that thanks to Albert for this. He says the fans wanted the curly permed Patterson. Well, here it is. Thank you.
It's great ballad, aren't they?
It is, I tell you what, like, not bad at all. But yeah, let's have some closing comments then from you guys. I don't want to string it out when we don't need to. Everyone's got lives to lead, and tonight's been a great night, and I think we've spoken to everybody. Everyone feels, certainly reading the comments, everyone had the questions answered in a roundabout way, and they're happy. And Keith will always come back on and give us an opinion when we need him to, which is great. So Keith, just closing comments from you. Anything else you want to add to what you said?
I mean, all I've done tonight is try to summarise where we are and to alleviate anybody's worries in thinking that the Premier League's press release that they put out, which basically was missed the start, which it should have said once upon a time. Then they should have printed it, and then it should have said they all lived happily ever after, because it's just horseshit. So what they put out, Man City had talked about lobbying and I think lobbying is the wrong word tonight, but Man City are on about writing to each club and telling them what the true representation decisions were to the clubs, so that they know that what was really decided before they turn up at a meeting and start acting on what the Premier League's told them. For me, all I've done is shown you a route and told you that somebody asked what's a body. I've tried to explain that you need a body of people to take an action, and that can't be a club. So whether that's a past owner, whether that's a sponsor, I don't know. I don't know who it is, but I do know that fans could do it. Then I said, if it happened, and remember when we did it, we never got any funds of anybody. So whilst Amanda and Murdoch knew what we were doing at each stage. And while Ashley and all his team and both legal sides were with us, working with us all the way through, everything we did until we ended the case up in Newcastle, we paid for as fans. Now, I'll be open with you. I was given assurances that if the action ran into court, it could go to another $500,000. And I was given assurance that Mike Ashley would cover that, which was phenomenal, because it meant that I could sleep at night and then I could just sit and say, right, bring the case on, and that's why I'd push it. But when Amanda and Murdoch were in this club, it was a lot simpler for to go and approach them. I've spoken to Murdoch twice this week, and it was much easier to get answers and to say, how's it stand? But when I listen to Stu and Mitch as well, they do something I've never done. They live in the Middle East. They know the culture, they know the way the people act, and they know what to expect of people. And they know, like Stu's just put a convincing pick that these people don't mess about. And if they start, they finish. But I don't know what that feels like. So let's suppose, and turn the clock back 3 years, I was sat there with Gordon, we put this case together. I worked for 14 months without any wages to put the case together and to take it in. I was working 10 to 14 hours a day. It was crazy. There was death threats, everything. But at the end of it, I got nothing. I was told I'd get looked after. I got nothing. I didn't get a season ticket. But if it was today and I had that on, who would come to me and say to us, who would I be talking? Because at the time I was talking to the club, I was talking to the lawyers, I was in the room with all the people that mattered. I was sat watching every stage. I knew the takeover had been verbally passed in the July, even though it only got announced in the October. I knew from the July it had been agreed. It was signed on the Saturday, it didn't get announced till Thursday night, 5 o'clock. But who in the club today would come to me and say, right, Keith, you're the bloke who's built this case up. You've got 2 top lawyers, one on sports dispute, one on competition, and they're going to fight the case. And you've put your own monies in, you've built a case, because I've got easy to build a case. Who's in the club? It sounds to me as though PIF are so distant that you can't get through to them or talk to them. Who comes to you now? Because in the absence of Mandrin and Murdoch going, Darren Eales has got an illness, who in the club comes to you and says, winks at you and says, right, run your crowd action and donations will go in. Us in Man City will donate, because that's what the kind of nod the next May is going to need if they're going to start building this case up. They're going to need, see, I had confirmation and backing. You know this, Mitch, you listen to some of the conversations where you know that if it got messy and if it ran, whilst we're guaranteed to get the takeover, whilst we're guaranteed to win a competition action, we're also guaranteed to get help with money if it got messy or it got big. So if it went past, when it got into the million touch, there was somebody there with a pocket that could do it. And whilst a lot of criticism, then people were motivated to sell the club. Who does that now? Because I'm not convinced if us three sat and put an action together, and I know who'll build the action that couldn't be won. I know exactly how to do that. Don't need any help. Put it on the table, the funds come in, and let's suppose we raise 30, 40, 50, 60 grand. Who's the person that's going to come along and put donations in to make that case fly? That's my concern, because I think in this new ownership at Newcastle United, it's more distant, and it's not as approachable as it was in the day when we got the takeover.
Okay, Mitch, what's your final words tonight?
I think all of this should bring home. There's 2 points that myself and Stu have returned to 2 or 3 times over the last couple of years since the takeover. Firstly, regarding assessment of sponsorships for companies outside of the UK and companies outside of Europe. The framework that they've been using to assess cannot evaluate what it is worth. That's different to value what it is worth to a company in the Middle East to sponsor Newcastle United. And the element you always use is Noon, and how Noon's deficit to Amazon is it decreased significantly, all based on being associated with Newcastle United as a shirt sleeve sponsor in this region. And therefore, is that worth more than the 8.75 million they supposedly paid for it? You're too bloody right it is.
Yeah.
And so there's absolutely no way that framework, which is now being proved to be unlawful, was ever going to be able to assess deals like the ones we could make properly anyway. The other thing, and I'll come back to this again with another example, the client journalism, go back to the days pre-takeover where we're talking about geopolitics and there was client journalism going on there. It's now reared its ugly head in the last 24 hours. You've got 4 journalists reporting everything very differently to everybody else. You've got 4 journalists espousing a very hard line that the Premier League's won and nothing's wrong and everything's great and rosy in the garden. But it went another distance for me yesterday when Xavier Solikol on Sky Sports actually used the example of Newcastle United using fake sponsorships to inflate their books. And they're the words he used on the television. They're not even hiding it now.
That's illegal, isn't it? Illegal.
They're all now out in the open. Why? Because they've been flushed out. The Man City case has flushed them all out. And so everybody, when other fans of the clubs are trying to wind you up and trying to show you, well, this journalist says this and that journalist says that, it comes back to the age-old adage, who's paying for it? Who's setting that up? Whose pocket are they in? It's like when I get a rep from a company come in with me and say, this is our new product and this is what it does and this is what it does clinically. First thing I look at, who paid for the study? Oh, it's your study. So it's going to tell us your stuff's great, isn't it? Right, bye. Bring us an independent study. I want to see something independent on that. Be as choosy with your journalism. Be as choosy with the journalists. I've seen another couple of people mentioned in the strapline there. When they're touting a Premier League line, the information they're getting is patently coming from the Premier League. And they want to dress it up as something that it isn't. And yes, when somebody says it's 25-2, they've only won 2 points out of 27. That doesn't sound good, does it? Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. They've only got to win 1. And that's the bit they're missing out. That's the bit they're leaving out. And a lot of the other points revolve around framework. Well, of course, if you're going to have rules, regulations and guidelines, you're going to have a regulatory framework around which it's based. And it seems to me that's the only thing they've been able to get right. The application and how they use those rules and how they bend those rules to suit seems to be the issue to me. And so there's a lot of people now are flushed wide out into the open. And it doesn't give me any real pleasure to sit here and say, we told you so. I wish we weren't in that situation. I wish we were just allowed to grow as a club in the way we wanted to and be left to our own business. But now we've been made part of somebody else's business. And that is, like Stu says, woe betide anybody if PIF decide to take the challenge up themselves, because they won't stop until they're done.
Can I say one quick thing? That's brilliant there. Can I just say one quick thing? Because I might forget this. It's how many times you had an email off me, a tweet, how many times you seen tweet I've put hashtag cartel and hashtag anti-competitive. You know, over the last 3.5 years, I would say anytime anything happens, I put it on, and I tell you what, it's a ball ache because competitive. The times you type that, you spell it wrong, and whenever you go to spell cartel, and you put it on, and you've got to make sure it's spelled. I should explain that when you start fighting competition cases, you look back over the whole ream of Twitter, and if all you've got to do is go on NCSL and go hashtag cartel, hashtag Twitter, all that comes down. So all the threads come down. So when I put that on, it's in preparation for when the fight actually happens. So I've been writing that on every anti-competitive behaviour or action or anything that's questionable. I put it on. So I just think I should explain that, because you might think, why does he put that on, and why does he keep labouring that point? I'm doing it so I can find it at a later time. Plus, when people are looking about cartel behaviour, they'll find me on there. But that was the reason. The other thing I want to say, because I should have said earlier, was thanks everybody for the kind words. Thanks to the panel. Thanks to Steve. And thanks to the platform, because it is humbling for an ordinary bloke to hear so many kind words. But I'll never be truly happy until it's smashed. I'll never be truly happy until this goes into a courtroom, until I can walk out there, hold my head up, and go over to a camera and just say, I told you so. And this has been a long time coming, and it's not over yet, but it's a lot closer to being ready to be fought and won.
Yeah. Stu, we gave you the opening words. We'll give you the closing words.
Well, in 11 days' time, I'll be having a beer with yourself and with Keith, and I can't wait for it. But Keith just made me get a bit worried. So every time you put a hashtag on, it's recorded, because I put hashtag Gorilla Gloves on through that takeover process about 2,000 times. I'll be in so much trouble. But there's only 3 things I want to say, Steve. And then once I've said these, I think I shouldn't have the final word. I think you should have the final word, because you've been the glue that's held us all together over the last 5 years. And you sit back and be quiet and let us spout our crap. And sometimes you don't get the chance to speak. So I'll run through them really quickly. This is to lay any fears of those who have got worries that the PAF aren't really interested in Newcastle. 2 reasons why that is just big dog's cock. First one, why would have given $1 billion to be in sports to, once the case was won, to allow Newcastle United takeover to happen? And they've probably spent as much since, including buying us, including investing us in player investment, restructuring of grounds, improvements, everything else. They've probably spent another $1 billion at least to get us from 7th of October 2021 to the 8th of October 2024. That's $2 billion. The club's not worth that yet, and they're in it to make money. So understand this. Let's say they spend another $1 billion on a stadium. There's $3 billion. They're not buying it to break equal or break even. They're buying it to make a profit. So instead of panicking, instead of being scaremongered by journalists who have an agenda against us, just bask in the glory. We've got owners who will take us to where we've always dreamed of. And it might not be as quick as we wanted, but as I said earlier, it might get fast-tracked a little bit more now after what's happened in the last 48 hours. So just enjoy that. The next thing was, and probably the saddest thing that's happened since October the 21st, 2021, is that the man in the top right corner there, Mr. Patterson, still can't get access to St. James's Park on a game-to-game basis. He has to spraff tickets of anyone he can to get in there. And for me, that's sacrilege. He genuinely, I mean, fair enough, you get people, I'm his mates, and I'm going to say things on his behalf, things he'll never say himself. There should be a Keith Patterson box or whatever. I'm not going to go. It should be a Keith Patterson stand. Not a chance. He's not that important. But he should have been a guest of honour for the first game, and we all know the reasons why he wasn't, which we'll keep off this platform. But I think he could have been granted a seat for life. 1 seat out of 52,000 for the efforts he made is a very, very small sacrifice to make for making hundreds of thousands of people worldwide happy or happier than they were, and giving us that glimpse of hope. And the last thing is, before you say your bit, Steve, is everyone just remember the future's bright, the future's black and white.
Well said.
Great stuff. Good show. Just want to thank the moderators, really. Everybody who has contributed to the platform, you know, as contributors over the years. It's been great to work with so many people who've got views about Newcastle. But the amigos and the professionals in particular have been, you know, the most special shows to do. But without the help of the likes of Julie and without the help of Les and Tom and, Ian, they're all in the chat tonight, and all the other moderators who do their bit. Don, was a recent one. Mozza, of course, who's on holiday yet still in the chat. Everyone who helps us and contributes in that particular way make the chat such an enjoyable experience, and it's enjoyable for us because we get a chance to read through it and see it all. And most importantly, thanks to the viewers for sticking with us, because there's a lot of competition out there. There are a lot of other podcasts out there which you could watch. Some of you watch them all, some of you only watch us. But you know what? Thank you just to you for watching, because I do 7 shows a week. It's an hour out of my day each day. I have to make an effort when I'm not going to be here to make sure you've still got the show. It's not something I ever wanted to do or commit to, but I enjoy doing it still. But I did tell you one day I may just say that's it. And when I do that, that's my choice. But at the moment, we're still doing 7 shows a week, still enjoying it, and still happy to be able to come and calm your nerves, I guess, and help you get through and understand some of the more complicated stuff that surrounds our football club. But for now, thank you to Steve Hasty, who departed slightly early. Thanks to Stu. Thanks to Mitch. Thank you to Keith. Thank you for watching. And we will see you all again soon. Tomorrow night is Talk of the Tune. Make sure you watch Talk of the Tune tomorrow night. It's a great show with Rob and Sid. That's on at 6 o'clock. I am, though, going to be on Big Up again, which is where we did the match day live. So if you haven't already, subscribe to www.bigup.com/NUFC Matters. Me and Joe Allen are going to do a show on there tomorrow night, 6 till 7 live as well. So you can take your pick, watch Talk of the Tune, and then jump over onto that. You'll be able to watch a rerun of our Joe Allen show. But thanks for tonight, lads. Take care. See you soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.